Hello, we are now into March, so I thought I would do my wrap up for the month of February. I managed to read 11 books in February and 4 comic book bind-ups, we'll call them. They are a webcomic that I've got the printed edition of, so I will show those at some point. But the first book I read in February was The Institute by Stephen King. This follows a young boy named Luke who is kidnapped and put into the Institute, which is basically a place where they abuse children to get out their psychic powers. It was a dark book, and by and large I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it. Luke as a character is fine, and I think the majority of the cast were completely fun, but I didn't love the ending, didn't love the beginning. Basically, the middle was good quality stuff when they were actually in the Institute, but it just didn't quite go to how I thought it was going to. And one of the characters that died in this book I was quite sad about. So I think I gave it like a 3.5. My friend recommended this to me, and it's not like I didn't enjoy it, I just don't think I would reread it at any point. So, The Institute. And the comic book bind-up. I'm going to do that next because, well, you will see. So I read the entirety of Check Please, which is split into year 1, 2, 3, and 4. I used to read this series on Tumblr all the time, and it follows the story of Eric Bittle, who joins a hockey team, an ice hockey team in university, and how his relationship with the other teammates and someone specifically blossom over the 4 years he is at Samuel University. I love this series. I think I gave them all either a 4.5 or a 5 stars. They are just such fun, and the art is absolutely gorgeous. I love how she does it. Ngozi Ukazu, she has done them all. She did them all as a webcomic back in like 2015, I want to say. And I read it as it was coming out, and then I lost track of it when Tumblr sort of died to death, or at least my Tumblr did. So I sort of missed like the tail end. So being able to finish it out was really fun. And yeah, I read them all in like 2 days. It was such a good time. And they came in this really nice little slipcase, which I really like. So these are now a prized possession because they cost a fortune. But I highly recommend, and there is, like I said, the Tumblr with all of it on. So I do recommend to pick it up. And the rest of the month, I devoted to reading the Demon Art series by Darren Shan. So I put this on my 2025 goals, and I sort of like knew I was going to do it early on because I wanted to get ahead of my reading goal because they're quite short books. So the Demon Arter series follows a host of characters as they go up against the Demon Arter, which are basically demons from another universe that are trying to encroach on our universe, and there's magic, and there's werewolves, there's so much going on. And overall, I would say it has shown its age a little bit. The series was published between, I think, 2005 and 2009, something like that. And there's 10 books in the series. And I think there is points in it which now you wouldn't get away with. I think some of the language and terminology that's used, you wouldn't use. And this is a middle grade horror. And quite honestly, I think it's a bit gruesome, even for me as a fully grown adult man. So, yes. But, ratings and some thoughts. So, like I said, there's 10 of them. And I read all 10. The first one, Lord Loss, I think was possibly one of the strongest. I think the Lord Loss shows a really good introduction to Grubbs as a character, who is sort of the main character, and also Lord Loss, who becomes this demon enemy that is like the arch enemy throughout the entire series. So I thought this was a really good start to the series. I gave this like a 3.75 stars. Definitely one of the stronger ones. Like I said, I enjoyed it. Lord Loss. And then there was Demon Thief, which introduces us to Colonel, who is one of the other leads, and I didn't love this as much. I thought the storyline was a bit weird. It did have a really interesting plot twist, but I did see it coming, so what can I say? I've read these sort of books before. When I read Slaughter, I think Slaughter was my favourite of the entire series. I think it's a very well done, self-contained story. It follows Grubbs again, and was a very bloody affair, but it was very enjoyable. So, Slaughter. Beck introduces us to the last of the main characters, Beck, and I will hand on heart say this is one of my least favourites in the series. I just don't get on with how Darren Shan writes Beck. which I will go on to explain as I get onto the later books, but I didn't love how she was written. So, Beck. Then Blood Beast and Demon Apocalypse are basically a two-part story. It basically should be one book, in my opinion. But they were both pretty good. These were like the strongest, apart from Slaughter. I think this is where the series then derails after this point. After Demon Apocalypse, which is book 6, it does sort of derail a bit. And these are both Grubbs books, I believe. So, yes. Then we went on to Death's Shadow, which is the second of Beck's narrated books. And it just strikes me that Darren Shan does not know what to do with this character. She is a ghost in the start of the series, essentially. In book 6, when she's introduced again. But it's just, yeah, it doesn't quite work for me. I don't know what it's about it, but Death's Shadow did not work for me in the way I wanted it to. It killed a really main character that I was really enjoying seeing character growth from, so Death's Shadow happened. Then Wolf Island. Wolf Island, I think, is the absolute turning point for the series because something happens in this book to Grubbs which basically ruins his character and sort of nullifies the entirety of him being a good person. And it just sort of ruins him a bit. I just don't think the series recovers after this point. I think this was probably, the last one that could possibly have saved it, but it didn't. It just derailed. And I think the last two, Dark Calling and Hell's Heroes, definitely feel that. I think this, because it's a Colonel's story, works slightly independently to the entire mess that is made of the Grubbs thing, but it soon comes back together and is sort of still derailed by the end. And the treatment of Beck at the end of this book and through Hell's Heroes really aggravated me because there is not a single female character in this series with any sort of like anything to them. I think all the female characters that I named die apart from Beck. Mild spoiler, I guess, but it's also like a decade and a half old, so if you haven't read it, you're probably not going to. But I genuinely was like, oh wow, there is just no one like supporting the main characters who is female. They've all been killed off and all been killed off in really gruesome ways. And I just, for me, as someone who is studying writing, is doing whole modules on like representation, this felt so poor as a result because Beck is treated so poorly and she's so not fully formed as a character. And yeah, it just really aggravated me. So that's the 10 books I read in the Demonata series. Probably won't be keeping them or going back to them. I think they've really aggravated me, but we shall see. I have started my read of The Queen of Air and Darkness by Cassandra Clare, so that's exciting. I also picked up some books the other day, which I am going to post on my TikTok, so very exciting. But I shall post a new video soon, I'm sure. Adios.